Perfect. Awesome. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to be presenting about my honors thesis, Older Adults' Perspectives on Privacy with Digital Home Assistants. And so in the United States, demographics are shifting towards an aging population, and the greatest increase will be in this decade with 18 million additional older adults. So the impacts of aging may cause age-related barriers, especially for older adults with mobility disability, and 17% of older adults identified as having a mobility disability in a study at Harvard. And so there is great potential for technology to provide support for this population as they age. Specifically, digital home assistants have amazing potential to assist older adults in doing a lot of a range of activities like controlling their home environment, maintaining social interaction, and monitoring their health. And there are many factors that may inform the way that older adults use these devices. So one of them is privacy. And taking a step back to understand what privacy is, the literature says privacy is mainly control over your information's exposure and the content. And the literature also mentions how for older adults, privacy for them is defined in terms of space rather than information. But with my thesis, I wanted to explore more about how older adults are understanding and defining privacy with respect to their digital home assistant. And so some things that I was trying to hone in on and focus on is developing a more comprehensive understanding of the way that older adults view privacy, their experiences with privacy with their digital home assistant, how they perceive privacy with their digital home assistant, as well as how they're interacting with it. What are some, tactics or strategies that they're engaging in? And so the main thing was to understand how older adults are defining and perceiving privacy with their DHA specifically. And how this worked was my thesis data collection was part of a larger study at the lab where older adults were given digital home assistant, Amazon Echo Show, a smart light, and a smart plug for up to 10 weeks. And as they used that, I would collect the data at the 10-week mark. So during that 10-week encounter, we started off collecting the command history, which is the commands that they were given. We collected quantitative data with the TechSage background questionnaire. We did a semi-structured interview to understand just their overall perceptions about the digital home assistant, the Amazon Echo Show, smart plug, and smart light. And then the privacy interviews where I took my data collection, and that was focused on really asking about how they feel with privacy and security in terms of the digital home assistant. And then, of course, at the end, we debriefed and gave them an Amazon e-code. So the criteria for the study was to be 60 years and older, self-identify as having a mobility disability, use some type of mobility aid, and also it was important to have no prior experience with any digital home assistant or connected technology. So all in all, we had 7 participants, 5 women and 2 men, who identified with various chronic conditions like MS, high cholesterol, osteoporosis. They were also very highly educated, with most of them having a master's degree, 1 doctorate, and 2 bachelor's degrees. And then the average age was about 68.7, with the youngest participant 61 and the oldest one 77 years old. And so there were 3 main questions that I had that I wanted to answer. The first one being, what are older adults' attitudes about privacy with their digital home assistant, specifically regarding the right to maintain control and confidentiality over their personal information? So I asked 2 questions in the interview to answer this. The first one, I defined what privacy is for them, and I asked them, how did you feel about your privacy with your DHA? Second thing is, I talked about how privacy and convenience are sometimes 2 opposing ideas, where the more you have one, the less you have of the other. And I asked them, with that in mind, what is more important to them, convenience or privacy? So answering the first question here, how did you feel about your privacy with the DHA? There were a variety of responses. Most of them, the valence was positive, and there were 2 neutral and 2 negative ones. And so for the neutral ones, we saw that older adults really have an indifference to their data being collected. This older adult said, Amazon has better things to do than analyze my privacy. Older adults with positive responses really were content with their privacy with the DHA. They felt comfortable in choosing what types of information to share. They were also confident about that information, that it would be kept private. So this participant shared medical information and their passwords, and they were comfortable in choosing that information, but also they felt really confident that nobody else would be able to see that. And then older adults with negative responses, they had a similar level of comfort in choosing information, but and they perceived, to be okay with their privacy. However, they were uncertain about, overall, they were really uncertain about who has access to the information. And then when we talked about privacy and convenience, 4 older adults prioritized convenience, and then 3 prioritized privacy. And so of those who said privacy, we can see that they really value protecting their information. They want it to be kept safe, and they don't want it to be stored or seen or shared. So this older adult said, in the back of her mind, privacy is always there when she's using this device. So that's really driving the way that she's using it. Additionally, this older adult kind of said that these concerns will ultimately drive the way that they use their DHA, and that leads to a limited use. So this user was using it for limited uses and didn't want to put information on the device that more than he had wanted to put. And then of those who said convenience, they are prioritizing an accessible lifestyle. So, they recognize that there is a balance between privacy and convenience. They're saying, there's some things that I can't do without giving up some privacy. And they're not really worried about their personal information being visible. This participant said there's not anything that they wouldn't share, and if people were going to find out something, they would find it out anyway. And they do recognize that balance where, they prefer the ease of use of the functionality of the digital home assistant over privacy. So for the second research question I asked, this was my second research question, was what are older adults' usage and attitudes of privacy settings and controls with their digital home assistant? So during the interview, I asked them, did you explore the privacy settings and controls? And then if they did they change anything? The second one was, did you ever try to prevent your Echo Show from listening to you? And if they mentioned the mute button, I asked, how often do you use it? Do you find it useful? And if they didn't, once they knew about it, is there a reason they haven't used it? Or now that you know, would you utilize this feature? So let's focus on this one. Did you explore the privacy settings and controls in the Echo Show? 4 respondents said yes, and 3 said no. And so of those who said no, there really wasn't a desire for them to even view the privacy settings because they felt it was, an unimportant feature of the digital home assistant. One said it didn't even occur to them. It wasn't important to them. But the 4 respondents who did view the privacy settings and controls, I asked a follow-up question, did you change any of the privacy controls? And so 2 of them did change, and 2 of them did not. So of those who did not change the settings, they were content with what was available, and so they didn't really identify a need to change anything. And what I thought was interesting was one participant said it wasn't a conscious decision, it was like more inertia for them. So nothing really stuck out to them when they were viewing it that would, prompt them to change anything. But for those who said yes, they were also similarly, they were content and satisfied with what was being offered, but they wanted to customize the settings to enhance their privacy. So one of them, once they figured out how to do the camera button shutter and the mute button, they used that to make them feel more secure. Another one disabled some setting where you can, it's called like Amazon Sidewalk, where you share your internet, and she questioned like, why do I even need to share that? And so they had like autonomy, and they really took agency in choosing what information to share with their digital home assistant to improve their privacy. So the second question of the second research question that I asked was, did you try to prevent your Echo Show from listening to you? For that one, 6 older adults said no, they never tried to prevent it. 1 of them said yes, they did try to prevent it. And so of those who said no, overall there was an acceptance of how the digital assistant functions. So they accept the fact that, you need to say the wake word to enact Alexa, and I should probably mute mine. And you need to, be using the mute button would kind of diminish the convenience of that. So they do also have a lack of concern about, for their privacy. This older adult said there was really nothing to be concerned about. And they do have indifference to their data being collected or shared. One older adult said, part of me feels like I don't care what stuff they have. But they also recognize that if they did use the mute button, overall the convenience of having something that's voice activated would be diminished. Now, the one older adult who did say yes that did use the mute button, she perceived it to be very useful. And she said, she felt like she was in control. She felt autonomous in being able to say, okay, I'm going to protect my privacy by enacting the mute button. And she said she muted it more and more in the room so Alexa wouldn't know when she walks into the room. But there were also other strategies that older adults engaged in to protect their privacy that were really external from like the native controls inside of the DHA. And one of them was one older adult just said she was not going to say the wake word. If she wanted to mention Alexa's name, she would say it very quietly, which I thought was very interesting. So it was interesting to see them engaging in like trial and error to see what would work best as they use the device over 10 weeks and to get more secure with it. And then my final third research question was, what are older adults' perceptions about what their digital home assistant is monitoring? And for that, I asked two questions. I talked about how currently there's one wake word called Alexa. Is there any feature you would add or edit to change how you get your device's attention? I also talked about the concept. Have you heard of the concept that the Echo Show is always listening? I asked them how they felt about it, what their thoughts were, and then any changes in design or functionality that would make. So we can focus here on the second question. Have you heard the concept that the Echo Show is always listening to you? 6 of the older adults said yes, they had heard of it, and 1 said no. And among all of the older adults, in response to this question, they were indifferent about their data being viewed or collected. So they were not really concerned with the device listening. Of those who had heard of it, they had an initial concern for their privacy. But through trial and error using the device, that kind of ended up increasing their level of comfort. So this older adult here said it was a huge concern in the beginning until she figured out how to use the camera and mute button, and that kind of increased the level of privacy that she felt. But also, knowledge of the room or overall, it did not limit how these older adults were using their digital home assistant. So this older adult, said, again, Amazon's got too much on their hands to worry about. I'm not doing anything particularly interesting or illegal, things like that. And then of the one older adult who said no, even after knowledge of this concept, she didn't really exhibit to be increased in worry about the device. She said it hasn't ever been an issue I've been aware of, concerned about. Even after she found out about it, she said she wasn't too worried about it hearing anything that's going on. And it is notable to mention that one older adult, after she had heard about this concept, her knowledge prompted her to start using the mute button. So there's, both that you can see. Some older adults don't really care, but others, they're really, they're being prompted to engage in extra privacy protective measures. And so just to wrap up kind of the main findings are, we can see that there's a lack of concern that older adults have for their privacy, and kind of indifference to what's being collected. As mentioned before, they said they don't really think their information is that important, that Amazon has better things to do, that they don't care what information Amazon has about them. But also older adults feel really comfortable in choosing what types of information they're going to share with their digital home assistant. Like one older adult said medical information and they put their passwords on it. Another one said, they would only give it in certain conditions where, like, if the FBI wanted to do an investigation, then they would give up their data. And they also feel agency and autonomy in being able to engage in, changing the controls, changing the settings, and having control over how the experience with their DHA works. They also recognize that there is a balance between privacy and convenience. They recognize that in order to reap the benefits of the DHA, they really need to compromise sometimes. And then we also kind of went through a refined definition of what privacy means to older adults. So we found out that older adults view privacy as spatial, both spatial and informational, which is different from the literature that I read, which was more about older adults seeing privacy as spatial. And so from the study, we found out that older adults see like personal interests, banking and finances, medical conditions as personal information, activities like accessing websites or paying the bills. They also saw that as private information. And then for me, I guess this study has really helped me achieve my goals or further my understanding of older adults. My goal would be to become a physician and become a doctor, and I want to work with older adults and geriatrics. That would be, my goal. And really understanding what privacy means to older adults can help clinicians and physicians, it has the potential to help them, give better and informed care, produce more like robust resources to better equip older adults with the tools to access their healthcare. So, telehealth, blood pressure monitoring, glucose monitoring, all that to successfully age in place. Also, I feel like it has the potential to help physicians take patient considerations into account when implementing technology into their healthcare environment, and knowing that, okay, this older adult views privacy like this, let's see how I can better implement this technology with their concerns. I also think that, when I'm a physician, hopefully, I want technology like digital home assistants to really be implemented into the overall care of older adults, and I feel like it can have the potential to decrease a lot of risk. For example, activating Alexa to turn on the light would mitigate the risk of an older adult getting up out of their wheelchair, trying to turn on the light, and falling and hurting themselves. So overall, I want to be a physician who advocates for technology use among older adults to empower their health and help them age successfully. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening, and of course, this was a great project to do for the last 2 semesters. I've learned so much, and so much thanks to Dr. Rogers, Dr. Blocker, Dr. Tracy Mitzner, Emma Lax, and Ki Lim, who've helped me, brainstorm and go through this study and supported me throughout the process. So I really, really appreciate that.